Welcome, everyone, to the Over Extracted podcast, episode number 6. And today we're bringing in someone who, again, is running a local shop, a shop that I'm a regular to. And I wanted to bring them in and kind of hear about their motivations, their inspirations. And I think part of the most fun thing about bringing someone in that I'm not really personally, known for a long time is I don't know a lot of these answers already, like I would with a lot of other people. So it's going to be fun to learn more about all those things myself. So I wanted to welcome to the show, Scott.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for coming. Thanks for taking time out of your day. And Scott owns, if we've haven't mentioned this already, I'm sure it's probably in the title or something, but a cafe called Rikka Fika, which is a pretty unique name, but has a story behind it. That's the one thing I do know. But I would love it if you could share more about, your background before we get into the cafe. Like, what brought you into coffee? How did you end up at this point now?
Sure. The cafe started about 2.5, 3 years ago. But before then, I was actually a software engineer. I think there's like a storage page somewhere on our website that's now been removed. But yeah, I used to be in tech and graduated school as computer science major and worked in quite a few different tech companies, both like startups and big tech companies. But then how I got into coffee is actually kind of interesting story. So my wife, Michelle, who also owns and runs the cafe with me. So quite a few years back, her father's friend gifted him some coffee plants. So they live in Taiwan.
Okay.
And then they just for fun, they planted the coffees. And then a couple years later, they were actually able to harvest the coffees. And then, so at the time, I wasn't like into specialty coffee quite yet. I was just like a regular, coffee Starbucks frap drinker kind of.
Sure.
And they were, so going back to the coffee, her family in Taiwan, they got a nice little harvest from the 20 coffee plants or so that they had. They were able to sort of process it using like a blender as a depulper, and then they like hand washed it, and then kind of like dried it in a dehydrator. So like a super like hacky home thing. Like none of us knew what we were doing.
Sure.
But so we they were doing that in Taiwan, and then we were meeting them up for like a family vacation in Japan. And so they really wanted to like share with us the fruit of their harvest. So they like roasted it on a stovetop, brought it to Japan. So we met there, and then we were like brewing this in the hotel. And then I don't remember what the coffee tasted like. But I'm sure it was like probably like very mediocre just due to the process that it went through. But that kind of like activity really sort of like kickstarted all of our interest in like like coffee, like being able to like taste the coffee. And then I guess one other thing that kind of still has an impact on like us and also how the business kind of like formed around was like, at the time we really wanted to compare that coffee to a lot of the coffees. Like we were like, oh, I wonder how this stacks up to like the other coffees that people are brewing in Japan, like our own homegrown coffee. So we on that trip we like tried the coffee in the hotel. We're like, oh, okay, there's like like tastes like oolong tea, whatever. And then we were like, oh, let's look up all the cafes in the area, and then we're like, go sort of like cafe hop. At the time, we didn't know like that's a thing that people do, but we just like went around Tokyo like trying all sorts of different coffee, and that kind of also like planted the bug of the cafe hopping. And we've been doing that since then. Every time we go travel, we like plan our trip around like visiting different cafes. That also kind of like lended the to the background of Rikka Fika being a multi-roaster. But yeah, that's kind of how we like initially got into coffee. Is like we have this like homegrown batch of coffee that we really wanted to just like compare to other coffees, and then so that was an interesting experience. And then um, uh, we were kind of like at the time we were exploring. So we noticed that a lot of the cafes in Japan have like these pour over setups, and we were really sort of interested in like, oh, what is that? Looks so like meditating. It must be really fun to do. And then I remember Michelle had made a comment like, oh, it would be so fun if we make this like a ritual that we do every morning to just like make coffee at home. Um, and then so that's basically what we did. We went out and got like a little very basic Hario V60 setup at home. We didn't know we needed a gooseneck kettle or anything. We just kind of like bought whatever Hario has, Hario skill, and then we kind of like started trying to make coffee at home. So we kind of like started the home setup with pour over, and then uh, I know initially we were like, this doesn't taste good, and so like the sort of the computer scientist in me kind of just like wants to solve this as a problem, and so I went online to do a lot of research on like, oh, how do I brew coffee better, what am I sort of like this, what is the setup supposed to be, and like just the engineer in me kind of wants to really figure out the reasoning behind like like the extraction science and all that stuff. So yeah, I was a pretty like avid like the home barista website like lurker, I guess.
That's the best way to do it. Don't sign in on that.
Yeah.
Stay out of there.
Yeah, so I just like read tons and tons of stuff online and sort of started trying to like build my pour over skills. um and then so that was kind of like how I got started, doing brewing coffees and stuff. And then that kind of like went for a little bit, and then I remember another trip we went back to Taiwan. It was uh I remember this pretty clearly. When we went back to Taiwan, there was one trip where we were at Michelle's family's place, and her we went to like a couple different cafes, and we were just drinking coffee, and then I remember her dad suddenly made a comment and said, "This tastes like yogurt from Ethiopia," um, and then I was like, "How do you know?" Because at the time I was like brewing pour over and stuff like that, but I wasn't really getting into like the tasting notes and all that.
Understanding like origins and
Yeah. So I wasn't really familiar with that. I was just like, oh, it's just like I was able to make coffee at home, right? Um, and then I was like, how did you know? But he wasn't like a connoisseur or anything. He just a regular drinker. He's like, oh, I don't know. There's just like something distinct about it that made me think that it's a yogurt chef. Now we know that's like the blueberry notes, right? Um, but that was kind of like really fascinating to me. And I remember that was the moment I was like, okay, I'm going to be like the best taster in the family. So I'm gonna go out and try all the coffees and like learn all about the origins and stuff like that. And I remember that made me sign up to the at the time I that was a pretty new program, but La Cabra from Denmark had like it was interesting to me because they had a subscription program that always comes in 2 boxes of coffee. And then so then I subscribed to that, and they always make it a little bit like educational, like it's like a either same origin, two different processing, or like same varietal from two different farms, something like that. So that kind of like opened up my the door for me in terms of like learning how to like detect different tasting notes, learning about the origin processing and stuff like that. And to this day, when so Rikka Fika has his own coffee subscription now, and we kind of like our inspiration is sort of from that La Cabra program, where we make it always a little bit educational. We always send out like a newsletter to tell people like, here's why we source these two coffee. So yeah, that's kind of how I like fell into the world of specialty coffee. And then I also remember a story about espresso specifically, because at the time I was drinking mostly just pour overs.
Okay.
And then I was like, oh, at the time I was like, oh, pour over is like a superior way to try to taste coffee. Espresso is just kind of like, like a really strong sort of like dark flavor. I had that kind of impression from a visit to Italy one time. And there was a couple like traditional espresso bar that people kind of like raved about, and I tried it and I was like, what is like why are people drinking this? So then what changed my mind completely was that I think at the time Linea Mini just came out, and then the La Marzocco Home is kind of like bringing it on the market. And so they did a couple like open houses. At the time I lived in LA, and then they did an open house in LA, and then just like we were a friend of mine and I were like trying to find an activity to do. So we're just like, oh, let's just go to this like free open house thing, and we'll go try some coffee, take a look at the machine. And then the it was a really interesting experience, because I've never seen up close how espresso was like actually pulled. So then when they were like explaining like, oh, there's this like you have to adjust the grind size, and then you have to temp it and stuff like that, that was kind of fascinating. But what really blew my mind was like how good that espresso shot was. I think that was like the first like God shot that I tasted, and like props to them on pulling that at like an open house, right? But
the God shot level always moves though.
yeah,
It's a
that's
moving
true.
target. I feel like
Yeah.
you start with that first one, and then you try that shot now, and you're probably like, it's all right.
Yeah, for sure. At the time, it was really impressive for me. So we tried it as an espresso, we tried it as a cappuccino, and I was like, wow, this like my friend and I who went with me were like, I feel like we've just been drinking, like we didn't know that there's good coffee because we've just been drinking mediocre coffee, and now there's like like we can't go back, right? So I was like, okay, I'm determined to like buy a La Marzocco Linea Mini. And so that Christmas, I think they had like a really good sale or something, and I was able to get that machine. And yeah, just like start playing with espresso at home as well. And fortunately that I did buy that machine, because that's actually how we started the shop. We used the Linea Mini for the longest time back during our Rikka Fika's pop-up days. And then I don't know if you visited us when we still had
the
this
first like year or two over there, I think you guys had just a Mini.
Yeah. So we had the Mini for I think a good chunk of the first year until the volume started picking up. But yeah, it's the machine did us good.
I mean, I can only speak for I know y'all had the older Mini too, like the previous style. I don't know how to describe it, but I can only speak for those ones, but those things are tanks.
Yeah.
Those original Minis just go.
Yeah. Yeah. People say it's a home machine, but like you can definitely do a small shop just using that machine.
It seems to be the standard for pop-ups, more or less. Like most pop-ups I go to have a Mini. You know, when I went to my friend Siri, whose coffee we had just earlier, I sold her my GS3. So that's what she's using for that one, which I wouldn't even... A manual paddle GS3 is probably not the best for a pop-up because it's very meticulous, but like, it's still those early La Marzoccos or who bought them? Like, I can't remember who the company was. I almost said Chimbali, but it's not them. But they were, bought out. So I'm not sure. Oftentimes, corners start getting cut.
Right.
And so I've seen things on the newer ones where the panels are getting thinner and they're adding more plastic parts. Like the convertible portafilter, I think is like an interesting idea, but not great in the grand scheme. But a lot of people are copying it now. I think I've seen it on some other machines where people are using the same style. But yeah, the Mini definitely can hang for quite a while. Like you said, once your volume goes up, though, it can definitely struggle.
Yeah, I think it's more the fact that it's just one group. I don't think like performance-wise we've ever run into any issue. There was a couple times where we couldn't serve espresso, but it's because the parts were like old and worn out, but it wasn't really like the machine couldn't keep up with the volume or anything like that. So
sure.
Yeah. Anyways, that's a long answer to your question of like how did I get into coffee. I just have like very vivid memory of like I got into tasting and how I got into pour over and then espresso. I also want to shout out a shop in LA. It's called Primo Passo. I don't know if
I
you've.
don't think I've heard of it.
Yeah, that's when I had like again like a gotcha sort of experience, and it was like high volume too. But then I had ordered a macchiato at the time. I didn't know how to. At the time I didn't really know how to taste espresso. I just know that macchiato is like the fancy drink. Was trying to impress my girlfriend, then girlfriend. So I ordered this macchiato, and then I remember very clearly. I was like, "This tastes like really sweet, and there's like no bitterness at all." So I actually went back to the barista. I was like, "Did you add sugar into this?" And they were like, "No, it's just espresso and milk. I'm pretty sure." And then so I was like, "It tastes like legit like sweet." And then they were like, "Yeah, that's just a good shot." And and so I was like, we were like, he pulled another one and we like split it. And he was like, "Oh yeah, it's like really dialed in really well today." So that was kind of also like a mind blowing moment for me. And then I've been chasing after that ever since then. So
Right on.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting story because I feel like a lot of people land in coffee in much less organic ways. I feel like it's kind of interesting to run into coffee and be like, "Oh, this is kind of just like my family grew this, and it's they roast it on their stovetop." And now, but I also need to I think it's probably your father-in-law now who is like knew more about coffee, and you're like, "Oh, I got to know more than coffee."
I think he was just like he likes to plant plants. I don't think it was like more just like coffee. He just likes to grow plants, which is what what I was saying. Like now thinking about it and all how that batch of coffee came to be, it probably didn't taste great. But that was a really fun sort of just like a family memory for sure.
I've thought about like growing coffee trees because I know that they do it in California.
Yeah.
But I feel like 20 trees is a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's like they just like grow it in a small yard, and then I don't even think they spaced it properly. It was just like,
Okay.
yeah. It was just like they planted here and there. He's a very organic gardener, so he's just like, "Oh, I'll just put it in this corner." So,
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely some science behind like shade and stuff like that. However, I know nothing about it, but I'm sure there is some kind of.
Yeah, we didn't do any of that. So,
I mean, sounds like you got a decent enough harvest. I mean, I feel like 20 trees is, because I think one tree might produce maybe a pound or something like that on average. So, one tree would get me through like, a week.
Yeah. I mean, the family definitely had enough to like share. So
yeah, so that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, and that's for me also a macchiato was sort of my moment,
Mhm.
and I remember it too. It was at Lofty, and I never really had got macchiatos before. I was still at that point early in my coffee experience where I wasn't quite at the level where I was drinking black espresso yet.
Yeah.
Like that was still too intense for my palate. And we were on a bit of a coffee crawl. It was when I was working for my brother's company who repaired equipment. So like a lot of these coffee companies were clients.
Mhm.
And so on the weekends, some of the techs would want to go and like visit a bunch of shops. And so I
Right.
went with them. And I remember I think Lofty was like the third or fourth stop. And I was like, I can't do another like cappuccino. But I also know I can't, like an espresso might be too much for me too. So I got a macchiato thinking like, okay, it's small enough to where like I probably won't die.
Mhm.
I tasted it, I'm like, holy, I remember it definitely was in Ethiopia. And I was like, I'd never tasted fruit in coffee before like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is interesting. Like, I need to know more about this. And so through that business, because, I was working with coffee gear all the time, I just had fallen in love with La Marzocco's. And so my brother started working for them and he had family discounts. And he was like, I get 3 of these over my career of La Marzocco if you want one. And I was like, yeah. So I got a Linea Mini and a whatever, the Lux D, the modified Mozzer. And it was only like $2,300 at that point for those two with the family discount.
That's a good deal.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, like at the time it was a lot. I had never spent that much on like a hobby all at once.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, like let's do it.
Yeah.
And then I remember much like, your experience at Rikka Fika, like starting with the mini and like that machine was such a pivotal point.
Mhm.
If I hadn't gotten that machine, I wouldn't be here today because that machine was kind of where I learned a lot and decided I wanted to make videos and talk about coffee and share coffee content. And so that was such a huge piece of that puzzle for me. So shout out to the classic Linea Mini for sure. But one thing I definitely, you mentioned sourcing coffee. I do want to get into that a little bit. But first, can you briefly explain Rikka Fika as a brand? Like explain the name. And also, one of the things that I've noticed, and I think we've maybe briefly have talked about this, but you tend to bring in mostly, coffees from like the Asias, like Japan, Taiwan, and then also coffees from like the Netherlands.
Scandinavia.
Yeah.
So like the name Rikka Fika comes from two different words from two different cultures. So I guess to talk a little bit about the sort of atmosphere and the feeling that we're trying to create when we started the cafe, we really like, especially in San Diego, like the early summer days where the sunlight is, there's like soft sunlight coming through the window, and we're able to just, be lazy at home, drink a little bit of coffee, sort of enjoying the afternoon. And that's where the word Rika comes from. That's the word for that marks the first day of summer in Japanese. So that's kind of like the feeling early May, sort of, we're trying to invoke. And then fika, you probably know, is the Swedish word for like a daily coffee break. And we really want people to sort of take the time to sort of break out of their daily routine and come to our cafe and enjoy just like a slow coffee moment in their day. So that's kind of where the name comes from. And it coincidentally sort of encapsulates the sort of the inspiration in terms of style that we sort of want to capture, which is the Japanese and craftsmanship and the minimalism from Scandinavia. And that's sort of where we get a lot of our like design inspiration and branding inspiration from, is kind of like a merge of like a Japanese and Scandinavian vibe to the cafe. So the name kind of reflects that. And then in terms of, you were asking about sourcing coffee from international. Yeah. So I guess the idea behind being a international specific multi-roaster, we do, go on a lot of travels, especially in Japan, and also recently more so in a lot of Scandinavian countries. That's kind of like the countries that we really have like really memorable trips ourselves. But also I think it's, I mean, Scandinavia as a coffee sort of specialty coffee pioneer, so to speak. I'm very drawn to just like the light roast, or even the ultra light roast that a lot of the Scandinavian roasters are doing. So that's kind of the profile that we wanted to showcase, and that's why we decided to source a lot of the Scandinavian roasters that I personally like, as well as Japan. Japan is kind of interesting, and we can get deeper into Japan in a little bit, but they do have like a group of roasters that are now doing a lot more light roast, whereas traditionally Japan is sort of seen as more of a traditional dark roast coffee in their kisaten culture. So I want to showcase the sort of the newer roasters that are now doing light roast as well, and then just how it came to be is like we like to go to different coffee shops when we're traveling, and we talk to a lot of different roasters and kind of sort of become friends with them. And then it's a little bit to solve my own problem as well, because I want to buy from these Scandinavian roasters and Japanese roasters, and just like international roasters in general. But then like if as a consumer, the shipping fee is kind of like prevents me from doing that very often. So then when we started talking about opening a coffee shop, I was like, that's one of the goals, to sort of like bring that in and make it more accessible to everyone else who also has the same interest, and then just like start from solving my own problem of like being able to try these roasters, and then sharing that with the communities. so to speak. So
Yeah, I think that's, a great thing to have in San Diego. I feel like the multi-roaster project or like that as a business, at least in San Diego, has really kind of disappeared
Mhm.
because of the accessibility of roasting your own coffee. It
Mhm, mhm.
just now there's multiple collectives to roast at. There's multiple companies that sell green coffee. There's always people doing, green coffee or coffee cuppings here where they're selling their green coffee. And so it's such a rare treat. On top of that, having, most places don't really bring in a lot of international
Yeah.
coffees. Like the only other multi roaster I can think of is Monomic.
Mhm, mhm.
And when I go there, they have lots of great coffees, and sometimes they have La Cabra, but La Cabra also has a New York City based
No,
roasting.
they do, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's for me, like you mentioned, the shipping
Mhm,
costs. Like oftentimes I'll see someone, since coffee is such an international thing,
mhm.
and a lot of people that I follow or who follow me are sharing coffees, and I see people have coffees. I'm like, oh, I really want to try that.
Right.
And I'll go to their website and I'll add a couple things to my cart, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to pay like twice as much for the shipping than I
Yeah.
will. So I'm like, I don't know if I can make that make sense,
Yeah.
And so,
Because back then I would have to order like 6 or 7 bags of coffee to make the shipping cost make sense to like,
Mhm.
like even it out a little bit. But then I don't have that many like coffee friends that I can share that with at the time, right? So yeah, I totally get what you mean.
yeah. So whenever I go in and I need coffee, I'm like, oh, let's see what's on the shelf because there's just always something different or something that I haven't had in a while. Like you dropped off some Tim Wendelbo, which you know, I think the last time I bought a Tim Wendelbo, it was from you.
Mhm.
Um, and y'all had DAC recently, and I bought a
Mhm.
box of that because everyone was raving about DAC, and I don't think I'd
Right.
ever had it before.
Yeah.
And so it's just fun to have access to those things without, of course, they're still like relatively expensive because you have to also offset your costs.
Yeah.
But when you're buying in bulk, obviously the shipping costs isn't, you know, massive or like the same amount as buying the box of coffee.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess we try to account that take that into account as well. So in terms of just like shipping and tax and stuff like that. So we actually don't like mark up too much the coffee. We try to keep it affordable, just like not too different from the MSRP that the roasters would have,
Mhm.
just so that people get a chance to try them, and that's something that we're like committed to doing. Yeah, so. mm, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that a lot of people are sort of like into the same thing, and I think that's part of the fun of being an international specific multi-roaster is like, um, it's now there's a lot of like light roasters in the US as well, right? But the reason why we continue to focus on international is because we want to offer something different, right? If someone can sort of like go online and buy a bag of say coffee and just like have it shipped to their door for I don't know like $3 shipping or something like that, um, like they are already able to do that. So that's why we're like, let's offer something that's different that people maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to find in the US, and then sort of share that with the community. And then, um, people always love learning about the stories and the different cool things behind what the roasters are doing. Like Doc, for example, is like people are raving about them because they have like really cool coffee like names for their box of
Mhm.
coffee, right? So we love like bringing that in and showing people, hey, like there's this coffee called a mango sunset or something like that, right?
Or
And
milky cake.
yeah, yeah, or milky cake, yeah. It's very creative with their names, but yeah, that's kind of the idea. It's just like we have this sort of internal idea of like travel the world through coffee. You might not be able to go to these places all the time, but like through learning about the roasters and their story, you kind of get a piece of that sort of like uh, travel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm still waiting for what is it? For fried hats?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
still haven't tried that one,
yeah.
but
Yeah, we haven't sorted fried hats. Yeah, maybe we can look into
I always see
that.
the jars. I think that's what they sell them in,
Yeah,
and
in
I'm
like
just
the
like, that looks really cool. But I'm like,
medicine pill jar
yeah,
sort of thing. Yeah, we have a friend who also runs a multi roaster in Hawaii, and his shop is called Try Coffee. So I don't know if you ever go to Hawaii. He pretty often carries Fried Hats.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. So I tried one of their Fried Hats coffee there, and it was really good. So yeah.
There's an idea. There's an idea. Yeah, I feel like it's a pretty interesting kind of design for a cafe to go down that road. And I do think that, you know, when someone explains like the melding of like Japanese and Scandinavian, I think oftentimes you like in my mind before I've experienced that myself, it does seem like it would be kind of cold, but it doesn't feel that way. Like in your cafe, it definitely feels more like opening or open and welcoming. And even though everything's very like there's a place for everything and there's very specific obviously like design and layout and like what the people are wearing and how stuff is presented, but to me it doesn't feel like soulless.
Yeah.
Right.
I see what you mean. I think we're very intentional about which elements we pick up from the sort of the Japanese design queue, and even just like within sort of like the Japanese aesthetic or the Scandinavian aesthetic, they have different styles, right? And like I think what you're probably alluding to is kind of like the more like wabi sabi, sort of very quiet and like very very bare bone minimal like Japanese style. But there's also a school that's like, you know, light color wood and sort of more like natural tones and stuff like that that feels warmer to people. And that's kind of like the part that we pick up from the Japanese aesthetic. I mean, same thing with the Scandinavian, right? There's sort of that sort of minimalistic, sort of clean palette, and but then there's also another school of Scandinavian aesthetic that is very like pop of color, you know, like just like, you know, bright colors, sort of more fun, I guess. But so then we kind of like pick the elements that we want to present in terms of like, I'm glad you're able to pick up like the warmth that we're trying to present. But yeah, I think that's why we think like it's definitely a good merge, but you know, we also like try to pick and choose the elements that we sort of bring together. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a definite balance that's there. You know, you have, like you said, the lighter woods and like just some of the warmer tones, but there's the pops of color are kind of specific to the retail shelf or the pastry case or like the drink themselves. So like those things kind of draw your eye versus, you know, a very busy cafe design or art or whatever happens to be there. I also, as someone who has very recently gotten into plants, I'm always like looking at the plants. I mean, the plants are very cool.
yeah.
I know people keep touching them, but you know, I resist. But I like look at them like, what is that plant?
Yeah, we get that a lot. We pick the sort of more dainty, quiet, like not as elaborate like desert plants. So there actually a lot of them are like desert plants that we are able to buy locally in San Diego. There are a couple nurseries that sell like these like small desert plants. So yeah, we're actually having a plant sale soon if you're interested.
Is that for the
stopping.
summer thing you're having?
Yeah. So yeah, we just posted our June schedule, and then there's I forget which weekend, but
it's the 14th.
yeah,
It's coming up.
there's a I think the coming weekend we have a plant and book sale.
Oh, right on.
So if you want to stop by and grab some plants, that might be a
I'll
good
always
time.
I come like try to come every weekend, so I'll swing by on Sunday and see if I can snag something. But yeah, like everything is very intentional. It's a very, you know, nice space, but I also do feel like I have that experience that you mentioned. Like a lot of cafes, you know, everyone has their own opinions about like how they want that space to be. And personally, I don't really like really tight spaces with a lot of people. Like I'm sure people do like that to a certain extent. That makes them feel alive or like they're surrounded by people and life and all that stuff. But I love that there's like a small little table and a bench like just outside the door, like around that little corner where like I'm not like sitting right where the line is coming in and just like it's a very quiet experience. And when I go there, I tend to just, you know, sip a shot of espresso and like, you know, vibe for a minute, which is definitely something that I feel like I don't do that often at cafes.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely aim to be in the background, sort of cafe. We aim to be, we always say the dependable friend that's there when you need it, but we're not super like loud and sort of you know I guess like more in your face. We just want to be like in the background and just comfortable.
Sure.
And hopefully that's the vibe that we're able to convey.
Yeah, I think y'all have achieved that for
Great.
sure.
Happy
For
to hear
sure.
that.
Yeah, it's like I also when people ask me, in San Diego, like where they should get coffee, um, it's definitely on my list, but I also think that beyond the coffee, the baked goods, like I could probably eat like 5 or 6 Cruffles. I feel like the cheesecake, I'm a sucker for a Basque cheesecake.
Oh, nice.
And I remember reading the description of it originally that you use some yogurt in there, so it's not quite as sweet.
Yeah.
It's like it's it all comes together really well. So is the baking side of the cafe, is that as well like a Japan or Scandinavian style? Like how did you come across that style?
Right. So we definitely from the get-go set out to be kind of like a double major sort of situation. We know that we want to have, focused craftsmanship on uh, coffee, but we also want to really, it's not just kind of like, oh, just fill the pastry case sort of situation. We want to have a focus in the baked goods that we offer. We want them to be unique and also be a good accompaniment to the drinks that we offer. So from initially, we've put a lot of attention to doing that. We do get a lot of inspiration from again through our travels and just like the contacts that we have from sort of the more Asian inspired sort of we sorry, let me re-say that. We definitely get a lot more contacts from sort of our like a lot of like sort of more Asian forward social media and just like through our travels back home and to Japan and stuff like that, we get a lot more information in terms of like what's sort of trending and what's been popular. And then we also really appreciate the taste profile of like highlighting the ingredients and not being too sweet. It's one of the things that you
Sure.
hear a lot with like Asian sort of desserts, right? It's like not too sweet. It's actually a compliment. So that's kind of like the profile that we focus on. I don't know if you've ever visited our pop-ups before.
I don't think so.
So Rikka Fika actually started as a pop-up for a very long time. We initially had planned a lot of our regulars kind of know these stories, and the people who follow us since the pop-up days, we initially were planning on opening at a different location than the location we're at now. But the construction kind of like ends up having a lot of like delays and stuff like that. And while that process was happening, we had rented a shared kitchen sort of situation that was meant to be temporary. Like a few, like we've only asked landlord for like I don't remember, it was like a 3-month rent or something like that. That kind of just like extended into more than a year. So we've been actually doing pop-up for more than a year. And how the pop-up started was actually we really wanted to get our baking program going. At the time, we were aiming to offer shokupan, or like the Japanese milk bread.
Yeah.
That was pretty popular, at least in Taiwan and in Japan. Like there was like a Japanese milk bread craze sort of thing.
I've made it before for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I would like to make
Oh,
bread.
I didn't know you
Yeah.
bake.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were definitely trying to get that started, and then that's actually kind of how we got on the map, so to speak. Our pop-up, I remember the first pop-up we started with like just like selling maybe like 10 loaves of shokupan, and then we were like wondering if people were gonna come, and then we started making things with the shokupan, like the some of
Fruit
our
sandwiches and stuff?
like the fruit sandals and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So we did that, and then it sort of just got uh like we got kind of like on some sort of viral trend, and then the line just got longer and longer and longer. So for the longest time we were like doing mainly bake sale, and the coffee was sort of just on this side. People like grab a cup of coffee when they're here to like buy a whole box of baked goods. So we did like bake sale basically for the longest time. But yeah, I mean, when we decided to like kind of like forego the previous location, and then sign the lease for the current location, the kitchen is like not as big as we um is not big enough for us to like actually do like a full like shokpan operation, because it's
Sure.
like very space intensive. So then we kind of like we're not able to sort of make shokpan consistently, but then the sort of Asian inspired pastries and all of that sort of we developed throughout the pop-up period all stayed with us, and we sort of like pivot our focus to fine-tuning those things, and like developing a few different flavors, and that's how we kind of like ended up with the baked good menu that we have now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you mentioned them not being incredibly sweet, and I feel like that's one of the things, or just, I understand that a lot of cafes don't have the space or the time to develop a pastry program or a kitchen or those types of things. So a lot of times you see the same, croissant
Yeah, yeah.
situation most places. But also oftentimes when I would get like a pastry to go with my coffee, you kind of just you sip your coffee and you take a bite of the pastry and it kind of just blows out your palate, and then the coffee tastes bad
Yeah,
at
yeah,
that
yeah.
point, because then it's just like tastes off, right?
Right.
I've never had that experience at Rikka Fika, right? Where if I get like a truffle, it's my usually go to. When I sit down, I can have that with an espresso, and I'm not like they're not fighting each other
Right.
like they would normally.
Yeah.
So I think that you definitely achieved that, and I like but there's a lot of things to choose from, but also there's not, right? There's stuff that's always there too, which is consistency is always nice.
Yeah.
I go there hoping for something to be there. Although I haven't seen the pineapple financier for a while, which I do like.
Yeah. The pineapple financier was kind of like comes with the pineapple cake that we make
Oh, okay.
occasionally. That one is also very dependent on like pineapple season, but also it is like processing pineapples kind of
It's a lot of work.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a decent amount of work. It Pineapple cake, for those that you don't know, is like a very traditional like Taiwanese pastry. It's like it's got like a crusty outside, but the inside is like with pineapple fillings.
I don't know if I've ever had it.
Oh, you should come try it next time that we have it.
When is pineapple season? I don't even know.
I would have to ask Michelle.
Well, she's sitting
Yeah.
right there. When is pineapple season? Do you know?
So I think it's usually during the summer, but for the pineapple cake, we usually have it during like the Moon Festival or like the New Year's times as well.
Okay.
Now that like it's easier to find pineapple, but because we make the paste from scratch, everything is from scratch. So it was a lot of work to process it and all that stuff.
Yeah, we kind of pull it out whenever there's like a more uh traditional holiday
Okay.
of the background that we grew up from,
Sure.
like Chinese New Year, for example, or Lunar. They're not like traditionally like Chinese New Year pastries or Lunar New Year pastry. It's just like kind of like,
Nostalgic.
yeah, it reminds us of home. So we kind of like pull that out whenever there's like a little bit like a traditional holiday celebration.
Okay.
And then the financier kind of like shares the same feeling. So we like also make some of that whenever we make pineapple cake. So yeah, I'll definitely let you know next time that we have
Absolutely.
some.
I mean, I love pineapple. Honestly, it's like one of those things that I don't have as much as I would like, because I feel like we're talking about pineapple season. It's just like not always as
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
right? So I feel like I like it on pizza. I know that can be one of those things that people don't generally like, but
We try to wait for the right, like we try to make our special flavors seasonal, because the fruit naturally tastes sweeter or better. We don't want to add too much sugar into, like, we could do like an off-season pineapple and just add a bunch of sugar, but that's not something that we want to do in our shop. So
yeah, I mean, I respect that, and I like as much as I want certain things year round, like, one thing was kind of rooting for to come back, and I've now got it every time I've been, is the passion fruit soda.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I love passion fruit.
Yeah, that's definitely a very like nostalgic summer drink from Taiwan as well. Just
Really?
like yeah. I think maybe Hong Kong also has like a similar thing, but it's like passion fruit and then lime. Just like I don't know if traditional is soda or is it just like with like with water, but a little bit of carbonation, definitely refreshing. So
Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna try to recreate that at home for sure, because I think you sweeten it with honey, correct?
yeah.
Yeah, so it's got like the sweetness. I use honey in like tea and stuff like that too, because the sweetness isn't quite as like heavy.
Right, yeah.
Like it's almost like creates a different texture too. It's like a velvety sort of sweetness. It's hard to
Yeah.
describe.
There's a certain tone that kind of like brings all the fruits and the citrus together, I feel like.
Yeah, because I grow, like right now I have a Meyer lemon tree and I have a passion fruit vine, so I'm like most of the way there.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's all you need.
Isn't there lime in it?
There is lime.
Okay.
It does add a little bit of flavor as well, but it's like if you want to do it with just lemon, that'll work as well. So
Yeah, I love that stuff. It's for me, my favorite thing to do at a cafe, and I feel like I've mentioned that before, is go and get like an espresso or some kind of small coffee, maybe milk-based drink, and then get like something to go
like
with
a fun
it.
drink on the
Yeah.
side. Yeah.
So that's, when you don't have that, it's usually like a cream top matcha.
Yeah.
But when that's on the menu, that's always on the
Happy
agenda.
Happy to hear that there's a fan.
Yeah, no, I mean, passion fruit's big out here. Like
Yeah.
they're considered invasive in California because they just grow. If you grow it in the ground, they just explode.
Yeah.
Like I have mine in a pot, but whenever I see a passion fruit vine like out in the wild, they're huge.
Yeah. I think I've definitely seen like people grow it like next to a pergola and it just like takes over the entire pergola.
Yeah, there's a stop sign in the neighborhood that has passion fruit just like growing up
Oh, really?
the stop sign.
Okay.
And I've pulled passion fruit off of there before, and I'm just like,
You gotta tell me where it is so okay.
Yeah, I'll just
go
let you know.
harvest some passion
But
fruit.
there's so many, they're everywhere, and they're like my neighbor has passion fruit in his yard, and it's growing through the fence,
Yeah.
and now I'm like, oh, those passion fruit that are growing are also now mine.
I know that you're a big fan of the croffle as well, because I remember the very first time that you came in. I don't think we've like met in person at the time. That was like
No, I think we probably just chatted on Instagram.
yeah.
before.
But the first time you came in, I think one of our baristas was like, "Hey, Asa's here. I think because one of our baristas knows you from before.
Okay.
And then
Oh, Noelle.
yeah.
Oh, I love Noelle. Noelle's awesome.
So she was
West
like,
Bean
"Oh,
days.
by the way, that's Asa, that's Sprometheus." I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I remember you like posted a Instagram story that was just like the croffle.
Mhm.
So yeah, did you like, was that like something new that you discovered at our cafe or?
That specific style, yes. I feel like generally I love waffles, and I've seen people put different things. They did have a croissant waffle, I think, at Anchorhead, which is
Oh, okay.
in Seattle,
Okay.
that I had. I think that was the first time I've had one, and that was like 2020. I think I was there just before the pandemic kicked off, like in February of 2020. And I went on like a little cafe crawl with my sister, and that was one of the places, and they had that, and I was like, oh, I'd never seen that before.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was big though. It was like a full like
Okay.
croissant,
Yeah.
and I kind of like the smaller
That
approach.
That's the other thing that we have been trying to sort of keep, just like keeping the pastries to sort of more bite size, because we would like whenever we go to a cafe, we would like buy a giant pastry that we just like can't finish. We feel like just like bite size more manageable for even if it's just like one person, you're able to.
I think also it allows you to try multiple.
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea as well.
I mean, personally, whenever I go with my partner, she gets her own croffle. Like, I'm not going to share that. But sometimes we'll get like a bun and share that instead. But yeah, I feel like they're the right size, and they're they're delicious. So that's a solid program you got there. So I definitely, I come for the coffee and I stay for the croffle.
That's the idea, yeah, for sure.
So it adds to the experience overall for sure. And the cakes, I bought like the Matilda cake one time,
Yeah,
and
yeah. That was surprisingly popular for us because we made it out of like Michelle's own craving of chocolate cake.
okay,
And then it kind of just like blew up on social. And then we had it for Valentine's Day, and then for the few days that we've had it, that was like the first thing that sells out in the morning, which was like a pleasant surprise for us for sure. We kind of maybe more unique in terms of like as a bakery is we try our hardest to sell out by the end of the day. Uh, I
you can drop in leftover truffles over the
yeah, so the goal is to like never have leftover. So I think uh initially, especially when we just opened, sort of towards the end of the day, maybe like half an hour before we closed, the pastry case will start to look a little bit empty, and people were kind of surprised by that. And then we take the opportunity to tell people like, hey, we try to sell out by the end of the day because we don't want to create any sort of waste. So we're like we to this day we're very careful about like the amount that we make, and we review like the counts of all the goods that we make every like we have like a weekly count sheet sort of thing to like make sure that we're like we're comfortable selling out of these, right? We'd rather not make more just to have the case be full at the end of the day and then having to sort of toss things away. So I know like maybe again, I no like prior food industry background but from what I understand, people kind of like try to count that like wastage into as cost, but it just feels bad throwing away food, so
Yeah.
we try not to do it.
Yeah, I think the dwindling pastry case is one of those things. It's very much like in an American mindset that I think a lot of us get sort of indoctrinated to. You know, we're the land of like the plentiful, right? So like, why do we when we show up at this cafe 2 hours or an hour before close is like nothing is there's less to pick from. It's like when you go to the grocery store and so much already good, perfectly fine produce gets put into like there's now like subscriptions for like imperfect produce because Americans don't want to buy a banana that looks a little weird or an apple that has an odd shape. Like there's a thing that it's supposed to look like. If it doesn't look like that, I'm not going to pick it up.
Yeah.
And if there's like the same mindset people have in a grocery store where you go by and you see that there's like one or two things left in the tray, you automatically think there must be something wrong with those things. So I'm not going to get them, right?
Yeah.
So there's some mental stuff at play there too.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's totally fine. If all the stuff that goes into trying to bake it, there's labor charges, there's power, there's gas, there's also ingredients. And so is it worth selling a few more to then throw away 10?
Yeah.
Or it's just like not really there?
Yeah, I guess that kind of like thematically speaking, just because both me and Michelle, we like come from a different industry, and so we don't know what is the customary way to do a lot of things. We just kind of try to do what we think is right, and yeah, just hoping to sort of like we don't like necessarily try to do things the traditional way or the like conventional way, so to speak.
Sure.
We just try to do things we think are right. So
I think that's the beauty of coffee too, because I've working in a company that sold espresso equipment and just general coffee equipment for the first handful of my years in coffee experience, is I was part of a lot of cafes opening. I sold the equipment to Jen at Communal when she opened her first space. I sold the equipment to the guys at Hawthorne when they opened their first space. So many of these cafes, everybody's coming from different backgrounds. They have a different vision. And I think that's what creates, a much more exciting and interesting coffee. Yeah. Like you don't really want everyone to be exactly the same and everyone to have the same menu and the same, design and this, even though that stuff does happen a lot because, you mentioned socials quite a bit, and like you get on Instagram and everyone's got a viral drink, or they have, the Dubai chocolate that everyone's now going crazy for. But it's like, it's just not that interesting when everyone's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think San Diego, unfortunately, has kind of fallen into that. And I think I talked about that with John from Necessity before, is just pre-pandemic, the San Diego coffee community was much more active and much more vibrant. And I feel like a lot of people were doing a lot of interesting things. And then the pandemic came and everyone went into like, trying to hold down the fort mode. A lot of super special stuff kind of went away. Events went away, and they're trying to bring them back. I see like Provecho really had a great throwdown that was like 60 people showed up, which is like a big show
I
up
heard it
for
was crazy.
for like a coffee thing. That's huge. And so, but part of me also thinks that might be just my opinion, because my partner had a friend come into town, and she's from San Antonio, and we took her to some different cafes around. Like we wanted to go to Rikka Fika, but it was the
Monday or Tuesday or something.
It was like the Sunday when the rock and roll marathon was happening, and we're like, we're not going to try to get over there.
Yeah.
I've tried that before, and it was very frustrating. So I was like, unfortunately, we won't be able to make it to Rikka Fika. But we went to a few places. We went to Mnemonic, and we went to Provecho, and I was like, I'd been to San Antonio a couple times, and I liked their coffee culture, but I didn't really delve too deep into it. And I was like, I just wish there was like more like interesting stuff happening here. And she was like, there's way more interesting stuff happening here than there is. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'm just like, jaded.
Yeah.
But I just feel like I like the wide swath of people coming from different backgrounds and opening coffee shops. Because even if I think it's a bad idea, like when Jen from Communal came to me and bought her first equipment, and she showed me the location of that first communal, which is on like University in Texas, where there's like no parking.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's also going to sell flowers. And like, as a coffee nerd, I was like, smell is such an important part of coffee. Like you're going to ruin the coffee. And like, I was like, this isn't going to work. And now she's opening her like 6th location.
Yeah. Actually, we have an interesting story with communal coffee as well. So not the coffee side, but the flower side, the initial, I think she has her own florist.
Native Poppy, I think. Yeah, she's over here in South.
Yeah. So she's actually our wedding florist.
Oh, right on.
And then that was before Communal Coffee opened. And I think at the time when we had her as our wedding florist, she was still like doing part-time like yoga teaching or something like that. But then after, when we reconnected with her, she's like, oh yeah, I got like this like coffee shop and flower thing going on. And we thought it was like the coolest thing that she's like, like part of the cafe. And then, so yeah, that was a interesting, and then, it's kind of crazy to see how much they expanded. So
yeah, I think they're opening one in Bankers Hill, which I think is like their 6th or 7th location.
Yeah, they're killing it.
The issue that I find, again, like I mentioned it to you before we even started recording, was that, and this is another thing I talked about with Provecho, is just the turnover at a place. Like, not to mention my concerns with maybe they're not being treated well or whatever the situation might be. I don't know what the case is at Communal, but I feel like the people, the consistency of the product varies in such a massive way. I can go there and get a drink that, is really good. The next day I can go with different people and it's not so good.
Yeah.
Right. So I know that there's definitely going to be variances, how people in their skill and like, how, I'm not asking everyone to be like crazy passionate about coffee to work in a coffee bar, but I just feel like to a certain extent, there's a level of understanding that I would expect. But yeah, that's my biggest gripe generally with most cafes, is just the inconsistency. And like, that's one thing I can say for Rikka Fika. I can say it for Provecho. I can say it for Necessity. A lot of these places, just like, I know what to expect. And I can have the expectation in my mind, and that expectation is either met or exceeded. So
yeah, I happy to hear that. One of our like hiring goal is to like prioritize, I guess, like long-term people who are interested in sort of staying long-term. And it's exactly like you said, for consistency's sake. And I think I think that is kind of like one of the good, like the best decision that we've sort of made when we decided to just like, okay, we try to like hire people who are interested in staying long term and just like keep them keep them happy and keep them as long as possible. Yeah, I really see like the camaraderie developing between them, as well as knowing regulars and sort of becoming friends with the regulars and stuff like that really sort of like helps build and solidify like a community around Rikka Fika. That was like something that was really cool to see and really satisfying for us to see. Yeah, I mean,
Well, I think Rikka Fika brings a lot of life to that block.
yeah, yeah. Actually, I was not too familiar with what that area was like before then. I've never like so I went to UC San Diego, so we're kind of like more in the La Jolla and north sort of area. I think the furthest that we used to go as like college student was like Kearney Mesa area. We never really like visited sort of like downtown. I guess like Little Italy maybe a couple times, but yeah, I was like completely not sure what the area was like, and we were initially it was like we were not sure if there was going to be foot traffic for a cafe, and then the space was a second generation cafe space. So
Yeah, who was it before? Do you remember?
it was Young Hickory.
Young Hickory.
Yeah,
I was trying to think of what that was.
Yeah, I've never really like visited Young Hickory before, but it was Young Hickory before us, and then I think um, we kind of got lucky with the fact that like there's a lot of development happening in the area as when we sort of went into the space, and we're also really blessed by a community that's like been really nice to us, and we uh, build up like quite a lot of regulars who are like all very like supportive of us and support our philosophy and stuff like that. So that's like something that's really satisfying for us to see for sure.
Yeah, I feel like the line ever since I've started going, the line has continually just grown and grown and grown. And so when me and my partner go on the weekends, we're like, let's get there early before the line starts getting too long.
Yeah.
So it goes rather quick, but it's just like when you're looking for parking, it kind of takes the wind out of your sails to be like, oh, I gotta find parking and then we gotta wait in line. So it's like,
Yeah.
but it's usually worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean we try to manage expectations as well. So that's why we've like added a little bit like of like an airport line to keep the the sidewalk
clear.
clear. And yeah, but I mean we love to give the whoever comes into our door, we love to give them the attention that they deserve and the attention to their drinks that it deserves. So I want to say we are able to go through it relatively quickly, but we don't try to rush things, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I never feel rushed, but everyone's always very polite, and it's always a good experience. But one thing I do want to touch on too, because we talked about things going viral or things on social media, and I think you're one of the very few cafes, and this kind of also falls into like the overall experience or the customer experience. I've been to a lot of cafes in my life at this point, and like within my coffee career, and I've filmed content and a good number of them, not a ton. I don't like to be a bother, and I also find it kind of embarrassing to film in public and like talk to a camera in public. But I think your cafe is one of the few, if I can't even think of any others, that has like a social media like expectation, basically.
Yeah, I guess it's mostly, I think you're referring to like the content capturing policy.
Like a policy for it.
Yeah. I think that's mostly to sort of the reason why we like announce that is to set the expectation for when people do come to our cafe. We don't want them to be like, because a lot of people come and ask if there's like Wi-Fi and things like that, and I think it's definitely like a valid use case for cafes to be offered as a workspace and have Wi-Fi and things like that. It's just not something that we like. We have a different like goal when we open this cafe, so that's why we want to sort of like put it out there to let people know like like, hey, this is what we're about. If you want to sort of come visit us, we don't want you to be like caught off guard about
Sure.
anything. In terms of like content capturing overall, I think it's mostly um, it's mostly like a logistic thing to like keep the pickup area clear. Um, uh, I and yeah, it's mostly just like that, and also I think like maybe we're have some concern about like some customers don't want to be in other people's video and stuff like that, so we
Yeah.
kind of just like want to sort of put it out there and make sure people are sort of aware of the things that are happening in cafe. With nothing against people like just like taking a quick snap of their drink in at their seats or anything like that. Like people are free to sort of capture their own experience as much as they want. We just sort of like ask for a little bit more like
Just awareness of the people around you. Yeah.
exactly. So it's not really um like we're really stern about anything. We just
No, it's just like I've never seen it in writing
Uh-huh,
before,
uh-huh.
right? And so I thought that was pretty interesting. When you walk up and like there's a little like
A little
no
sign.
photography like in the
Yeah.
pickup area
Yeah.
thing, which is something that I respect, right? And I think that there are content creators who don't think about how it affects other people's experience. And that's like part of it for me too, is like I try to be aware of the world around me. And like when I go into cafes, I don't generally walk in filming. I usually like ask people at the bar, do you mind if I film you? Or like, and I also make sure to like not capture people's faces and like that, don't want to be on camera or didn't agree to it or like, or just customers. Like, so it's kind of just one of those things that you shouldn't have to say, but so unfortunately you do, because it's just like a lot of like, I like to call like main character syndrome happens in the world of content creation where like, oh, like this whole world is my world where I get to do my thing and don't think about anybody else around you. So
Yeah, I think it's partly also just people maybe have different baselines and expectations because like I have I guess like the story that as a customer sort of learned like different cafes have different sort of like expectations and boundary is when we our family went to a cafe in Tokyo. Um, it's called Lambre, or like the ember
okay.
in French, I think. Uh, they're really like well known for like being a really like I think they are like 100 years old cafe or something. Just like a very like traditional kisaten. The baristas like make their coffee on a cloth dripper with like a very slow stream, and they're just like paying like the utmost attention to the drink they're making.
Okay.
And then at the time, I didn't really know like that was like they're paying so much attention to making coffee. And then at the time, we were like doing cafe hopping, and we were like are really curious about everything, right?
Just asking a bunch of questions.
I was like hammering him with my like broken Japanese about like, oh, what is the like I don't know like the cloth stripper, how does it work, or like the origin of the coffee. And then after fielding a couple of my question, he kind of like waved a server over and be like, hey, can you translate to him that I'm like trying to pay attention to like making this coffee. And then I was like, oh, I had no idea that I was like being rude and like being very interruptive, but now I know, right? So that was kind of just like my own learning from that. And then from then on, we kind of like sort of be whenever we go to cafe, whenever we try to take pictures, we always sort of ask the barista, hey, can we take picture if that's okay, and things like that. So I think it's mostly just about like awareness and learning that mindfulness. Yes, mindfulness.
Yeah, the cultural like differences are pretty interesting, and that's always like one of the fears that I have about filming. If or my partner wants to go to Japan soon, I'm just like, if I'm going to film something there, I'm like, I mean, I don't know what like the expectations are. Like, obviously, if the sign's in Japanese, I'm not going to be able to understand it.
Yeah.
And so it's just like trying to balance that and also create something interesting. It's one of those things that you kind of have to.
Yeah. I think if you're thinking about filming coffee shop, most of them are pretty friendly about like as long as you ask, they feel like you respect them, and they're usually okay with like taking picture and stuff like that. Like, um, I think there's only a couple shops where like no photos.
Yeah.
I think there's like one shop that's even like you're not allowed to post reviews online or something like that.
How can they manage that? Like,
I'm not sure. I think they just like I don't know. Maybe they ban you after if
oh,
they find out
interesting.
something like that. I don't know, but yeah, most cafes are generally pretty friendly about taking at least just like taking pictures and stuff like that. They'll try to like posture better,
Yeah.
just for the
I feel like the only cafe in the US, I mean, I haven't been to all of them, obviously, but the one that like I wasn't even filming it at the time. I was with family and we were in Brooklyn and I went to Say and I just had a camera around my neck and the guy at the bar was like, don't use that in here. Like as I was ordering, I'm like, okay. Like it could literally just be like a regular, tourist who likes to take pictures around Brooklyn or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Like it just felt like it put a bad taste in my mouth and since then I haven't had Say.
Yeah.
But I'll get some, the true Scandinavian roast instead. So the American knockoff. But yeah, I feel like the experience, can be colored in a way depending on how, the cafe reacts or how, if there's someone in there filming or taking pictures. And I know like part of the policy was too, like people coming in and filming content for like other brands.
Yeah, that was kind of we didn't expect that would happen, but again, it's more logistical. Like, I think we've had a couple of times where people like come in and did like a catwalk in the middle of our cafe, and uh, I'm really happy that they appreciate sort of like the aesthetics
design,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. But we just have a pretty small cafe. I mean, you've been the seating area. There's not much like room between the book library and then the tables and stuff like that. So it's mostly just to like make sure that the walkway is clear and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely respect that. I think it's something that more cafes should be open about. I think people are worried that it's going to like turn people off. But I think the people it's going to turn off are the people you don't necessarily want in your cafe.
Yeah, right,
like,
right.
and most people are going to look at that and be like, oh, cool. So I won't have like someone filming their annoying vlog behind me while I'm
Sure.
trying to like have my coffee.
Yeah.
So I think that's a solid way to approach it and to also, have the thoughts aren't necessarily about you, but they're about your customers and your customers' experience as opposed to like worry about your own income
Yeah.
and who it might bother.
Exactly. Yeah. In the end, we just want to sort of stay true to what we set out to do, which is to create our motto, so to speak, is to create an oasis where anyone can enjoy a seriously good coffee experience. And I think, to create an oasis, the entire experience sort of matters, right? So that's, I guess, like one of our ways that we're trying to like manage that and stay true to what we set out to do, kind of.
Yeah, well, I'd say y'all have achieved it. So anyway, I think we're bumping up against an hour and 15, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but where can people find you online if they want to jump on the coffee subscription or if they're in San Diego?
Yeah, so our most active channel would be the Instagram. So it's at Rikka Fika Cafe. So people can definitely follow us there. And rikkafika.com as well would be where you find we try our best to like put all the coffee offerings that we have in the cafe also online, as well as the monthly coffee subscription. So we, depending on like which roasters we feature, we'll have either 1 bag or 2 bag program that you can subscribe to, and then we'll ship from those roasters. And I think most of the time the coffee that you receive from the subscription would be kind of like not for retail. It would just be either exclusive, or sometimes we'll have them on pour over just so the other cafe guests can try. Yeah, so there's like some sort of exclusively sourced coffees for the coffee subscription program as well.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time and sharing your coffee experience and sharing more about your motivations and the thoughts behind Rikka Fika. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Fun.
Thanks for, I know it's can be a bit of an intimidating experience at first, but I feel like once you sit down and start talking, it's kind of easy to forget that the mics are there and the cameras are there. And you do have your manager here. So
my PR manager.
But anyway, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode 6 of the Over Extracted podcast. And as always, we will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.